I come. Hello, music fans, music collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Car King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Car King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490 AM.com, your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the program, I welcome back to the show for a part 2 interview with legendary drummer of 10 years after. I welcome back to the show, Rick Lee. Rick, thanks for being back.
It's my pleasure, Brian. I'm really happy to be here talking to you again.
Honored to have you. I wanted to touch upon your 1968 U.S. tour, Rick. Last time we didn't have a chance to. I believe the tour began in cities in the West Coast, California, Arizona. Talk a little bit about what you remember most about that United States tour.
Well, that was the first one we did. We actually were out for, I think it was 8 weeks, and we did 8 gigs. I was sending a diary back home, and which was being put in one of the music papers, saying that we were really cracking America, but that wasn't actually the truth. However, it made a good story. Yeah, so we flew. We arrived in Los Angeles. That's right, and we were picked up at the airport by Jerry Hoff, who was the London Records promotion man, and that was the first time ever we'd been in limousines. With electric windows and all that sort of stuff. Chick Churchill spent most of the journey to the hotel playing with the electric windows, getting them up and down. Anyway, the first gig we did was at Santa Monica Pier, and the billing really was for Alvin. They were likening him to Mike Bloomfield and Elvin Bishop and all those guys that were very popular at that point. And anyway, we played there, and it was a dreadful gig. It was like playing in an aircraft hangar. When you got inside, it was a very big venue, and then it had these sheets of steel in a circle around. And I mean, once you played a note on a guitar or hit a drum, it just went round and round, you know. So, for instance, when we first tried it, Alvin, and the stage was very high up, so consequently you were almost in this metal circle. And Alvin hit a note, and it just went ding 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 ding, just round and round the room. It was ridiculous. So anyway, we managed to get through that show, but it wasn't one of our best, and all the equipment was rented. We didn't have the Marshall gear that we had back in England because that wasn't available in America in those days. We had acoustic amps, which Alvin really hated. He was not a big fan of those at all. So it was a fairly miserable gig. Then we had to hightail it to Phoenix, Arizona, and we just had a station wagon with 2 what we call bench seats in there. So you'd have 3 people, the driver and 2 others sitting in the front, and then 3 people in the back. And our manager Chris Wright was with us, and I thought, this is going to be one hell of a journey. You know, I don't know how far it is to Phoenix from LA. It's got to be a good 100 miles, maybe 2. And I thought, anyway, there was a chance for me to go with the guy who was going in the equipment truck. So I went along with him. The downside of that was there was no air conditioning in the truck. So both of us were sitting there with just shorts on, no shirts, no socks, no shoes, and with both the windows open, and just to keep us cool. And we went through a place called Indio, which is I think it's probably the border of Arizona, if I remember rightly. And it was midnight. We stopped there to get some gas and some water. And it was 100 degrees at midnight,
Wow.
which is pretty warm, especially at midnight. The car with the band in it arrived at the same time, and they all got out to use the facilities and to buy drinks and stuff, same as us. And Chris Wright fell out of the car. That was our manager. I think he'd been having a good time with some wacky backy, as we called it in those days. So anyway, Mario was the driver that I was with. So we set off again anyway, and we arrived in Phoenix as the sun was coming up, about 6 in the morning, maybe 7, and we were just pedaling along in the truck, and the station wagon that the one of the crew, Andy was driving that. They passed us, and then this other truck came by. It was like a pickup, like a Dodge pickup or something like that, and it had excuse me, it had this bunch of rednecks in it, and they were then trying to run because they could see our guys with the long hair. They were trying to run their car off the road. They were trying to run the station wagon off the road, which luckily they didn't succeed in doing. But it was a bit of a scary moment at that point. Anyway, we got to the motel, checked in, had a good sleep, and then we did the gig was actually right next door to the motel, so we were able to walk through to the gig, which was very handy. And we were supporting the Grateful Dead. Now, in those days, we did a little bit of jamming, extended solos and stuff, but nothing like we just weren't ready for what the Dead would do. And they went on after us, and they were on for at least 2 hours, nearly 3, I think. It was just phenomenal the way they did their shows, and of course they went down an absolute storm with the audience. We went down pretty well, but nothing like they did, because we weren't well enough known either at that point. And next day we sat out by the pool again. It was about 120 in the shade, I think. So you were sitting on your lounger for about 2 minutes, and then diving into the pool, getting cooled off, and then coming back out to the lounger, and then about 5 minutes later you were absolutely dry and diving back in the pool. So I spent most of the time in and out of the pool trying to keep cool. But I got to know Phil Lesh, who was very, very nice, a great guy. I liked Phil. And I met the 2 drummers, whose names have escaped me now. But yeah, we all got on very well. Jerry Garcia came out and said hello, but he was busy doing stuff. I think he may have been doing interviews for radio or whatever, so we didn't see him for very long. Anyway, we're just getting comfortable there, and Chris Wright said, right, we've got to go. We've got to get back to Los Angeles. There's another show been put in. And we said, oh, the hell with that. We'll stay here for a few days. We can go and do another show some other time. Anyway, he wouldn't have that. So we set off, but we wanted to see the Grand Canyon. So we went via the Grand Canyon back to LA. The show we had to do wasn't that same night. It was the next night. And we got to the edge of the Grand Canyon, because in those days you could drive right up to the edge. There was no, I've been since, and the Indians have taken over the whole setup there, and you have to go in one of their buses. You can't take photographs. You want photographs, you have to buy them from them, which is fine. I think it's good that they're able to make a living out of the land that they owned before we pinched it off them. So we got to the edge of the Grand Canyon and basically just looked over the edge and said, wow, that's one hell of a hole there, We couldn't go down. We didn't have time. And it was getting dark. It was approaching sunset. There's a funny story I put in my book, actually, which is From Headstocks to Woodstock. The story over here is how was the Grand Canyon formed? And the answer is it's because a Scotsman dropped a dollar down a rabbit hole. The Scotsmen are known for not being that generous. They're quite tight with their money. So the idea being that the Scotsman had dug out the rabbit hole trying to find the dollar. But I don't think it would have gone a mile and a half down. I think the River Colorado did that. Anyway, we got to LA, and we were then booked back at the god-awful Santa Monica Pier venue. But this time we were supporting Jose Feliciano, and Jose was #1 in the charts at that time with "Light My Fire." So the place was packed, and it was much better. The sound was better because there were people there to absorb the echo. And he was a hell of a nice guy, Jose. He went down very, very well indeed, and we were very well accepted as well, which was good. So we felt we were like beginning to get through to people in the States. The next thing was up to San Francisco to Bill Graham. Before we went to America, sent a telegram to Bill Graham was the promoter at the Fillmore West in San Francisco.
Yep.
And Bill had sent a telegram to Chris Wright way before we went to America, saying he'd heard our first album. That's right, the studio album we did, which is called 10 Years After. And he had sent this telegram and said, if you're ever in America, then please come and play my venue, and if you could let me know what the deal would be, I'd appreciate it, you know. So Chris wrote back to him, and I don't know what the conversation was like with that. But Chris then went crazy trying to find the money to get us out there. And I think he managed to arrange some tour support, which the record companies did in those days, probably from London Records, which is the arm of Decca. Decca was the English version, London Records, the American company. And I think he managed to pick up a publishing deal on Alvin's songs, got an advance against Alvin's songs. Anyway, we got to America, which was good. The agency at that time was William Morris, who really were agents for film actors and theatre people. Sorry, excuse me, I'm just having a sip of water.
Okay.
And they they didn't really know much about booking rock bands at that point in time. I think they improved later, but we'd moved on by that in the second time we were with Frank Barcelona at Premier Talent. But anyway, we got there and we played. I think it was 3 nights: Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Fillmore West. Sorry, excuse me.
Now, Rick, I'm sorry if I may interject. At the Fillmore West, you played with Canned Heat. Is that correct?
Yes, I was just coming to that, and that was at the original Fillmore building.
The original, okay.
Yeah, it was on Fillmore Street, and the opening act was Dan Hicks and his Hot Licks, then us, and then Canned Heat with the headliners. And they showed us how to jam. They did Boogie, which was about a 15-20 minute long song where everybody took a solo. I mean, Bob the Bear was a great harmonica player, so he did a harmonica solo. Alan was it Alan Wilson, wasn't it? Alan played great guitar solo. Henry Vestine the same. Excuse me, Larry the Mole on bass was just stunning. He played a great bass solo, and then finally Fito did the drum solo. And so we learned a lot from that, which we then took back to England. Well, we kept honing it on the rest of the tour, but that was where we really got to learn to jam stuff. And we became very, very firm friends with Canned Heat. Sadly, they've all passed on now, with the exception of Fito. And in 2019, we did a tour of Europe. I think it's called Woodstock Revisited, with Canned Heat. But sadly, Larry had died just before that tour. But they came over to Europe, and we had a really good time. We did about 15 dates together. The business was phenomenal. And we got on famously, like we always did, you know, and Fito and I have been friends all that time. Go ahead.
Yeah, now in that tour, you also met other luminaries like Jeff Beck, Frank Zappa. Talk a little bit about those two.
Well, Beck we'd met in UK because we'd been doing some support gigs with him in the UK. And I remember one of them was at it was at Christmas time, but it was in one of the Oxford colleges, the Oxford University, I should say, sorry. Oxford and Cambridge universities had summer shows where they put on a whole load of acts, probably about 10 to 15 acts on over 2 nights. And then they had Christmas, not balls, they weren't like the summer things, but gatherings, I think is a good word. And they would just have a couple of bands on, and on one of those, I'm pretty sure it was Oxford, we supported the Jeff Beck group, who were comprised of Rod Stewart on vocals, Ronnie Wood on bass, and Mickey Waller played drums. That was the Beck group in those days, and they actually made the Truth album, which went top 10 in America. And at that point, Jeff said that Mickey was, for some reason, wasn't going to be able to do a few gigs with them. And he said, would I like to join the band? And I said, well, I was very honored, very flattered. But, 10 years after's book was absolutely full of dates. So there's no way that I could do it. Added to which, I didn't really want to jump ship because I knew that Jeff could change his musicians as often as he changed his trousers,
Right.
So, however, he and I became very good friends later after the tours because we were neighbours when we both lived in Kent. We were only a few miles from each other, so we used to see each other quite a bit. But when we came to the States, just to leap back a little bit, when we finished off the first American tour, Bill Graham had just decided to open the Fillmore East in New York, and we were going back via New York, and he said, would we play there on the way back? And we said, yeah, we'd love to. So we were one of the first acts to play at Fillmore East. And we played there on a weekend, and then Fillmore East was on the east side of New York, and over on the west side was Steve Paul's Scene Club, which had been started as a sort of late night drinking club for actors and actresses that had been on Broadway or off Broadway. Then they all used to gather at Steve's place for a drink and a social. Sorry, excuse me. I think Steve was a wannabe thespian.
I'm sorry. And the Scene Club, is similar to the London clubs. Is that right?
It was in a basement on 40. I'll stand corrected. I think it was 47th Street.
47th Street, yeah.
Yeah, on the east side of 8th Avenue. The west side of 8th Avenue. And all around it were apartments where the hookers did their trade.
Huh.
But they weren't allowed in the scene. And the scene became a gathering place for musicians who'd finished gigs. So we all used to pile in there and have a few drinks and a chat and talk to the groupies and what have you. So Steve gave us 3 nights there. And that's when Dee Anthony had been hired by Chris Wright to do our American management. And Dee was a big friend of Frank Barcelona's and Premier Talent. So he brought Frank along to see us, and Frank decided he would take the helm as our agent, and from there on in did a sterling job. Frank was amazing at packaging. He used to package acts really, really well. Just a quick example: we weren't really that big in Los Angeles. We really got big on the East Coast and the central parts of America before we really cracked the West Coast. And in order to get us into Los Angeles, or at least although bizarrely we had paid the West Coast, as I just outlined, but we couldn't play somewhere like the Forum in LA. We couldn't draw the people. So what Frank did, which was very smart, is he got us to headline, but he actually put Grand Funk Railroad, who had a bigger draw in Los Angeles than we did at that point, and they in a sense supported us. He made a deal with their manager Terry. I don't know what the deal was, but somehow or other he had us close the show, and Frank and Grand Funk pulled all the people in. So that was just an example of how clever Barcelona was.
Now, Rick, I want to ask you, at the Scene Club, I read that Jimi Hendrix and the Who would come and see you guys play.
Don't recall the Who, but certainly Hendrix turned up one night with Larry Coryell, the jazz guitarist, and the guy from the McCoys who went with Edgar Winter. I've forgotten his name. Rick Derringer.
Right.
So those,
I mean, everyone gathered at that club. B.B. King, Buddy Guy, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was going to come to that. So Hendrix turned up, but he wanted to play bass. So he asked to sit in. We said yes, and we knew Jimmy anyway because we'd met them on gigs in England. The Jimi Hendrix Experience. Mitch was with him as well, the drummer, Mitch Mitchell.
Yeah.
So Jimmy came on and took Leo's bass and just flipped it upside down. He didn't have to restring it or anything, and he played bass, an upside down bass because he was left-handed. And Larry Coryell was on guitar, Alvin Lee on guitar, and Rick Derringer. I sat in on drums for the first two songs, I think. Chick Churchill was on keys, of course, and he was still there. And then after the second song, Mitch tapped me on the shoulder, said, could he sit in? And I'd been playing for quite a long time that night. I think we used to do 3 sets. So I was ready for a break. And I said, yeah, go for it. So that they all carried on jamming. And then, to be honest, it got a little bit tedious because if you're not careful, the musicians start to try and outdo each other, with the way they're playing. And so it got a little bit tedious for me. And I'd met a young lady there and a friend, and we went up the road and had breakfast because it was about 3 or 4 in the morning at that point. And then came back down, and Mitch had left, Jimmy had gone. I think Alvin was still battling it out with Larry Coryell. I can't honestly remember, but and the place was beginning to empty because I think it closed at 4:30 or 5. So that was when Hendrix played. Yeah, I also, Mike Vernon, our record producer in England, came into town one time. This was later than when we played with Jimmy. And B.B. King was with him, and he introduced me to B.B. What a charming person. What a charming man. Fabulous. I didn't spend much time with B.B., but he was, the short time I did spend with him, he was wonderful. And then we played with him later in Chicago. We supported him when he had his big band there. And that was fantastic. Wow, they swung like the Clappers. They were amazing. So yeah, that's how we met BB.
So I have a couple of minutes left. So the U.S. tour was a realization of a dream.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we'd never even figured that we'd go to America, but thank God we did. Thank God we did Woodstock. So.
Absolutely. Now let me get this in, Rick. Why did the band break up?
Did we not cover that before?
Now you guys had aspirations and hopes of, doing your own thing at that time.
No, what it was in 1974-5, I think it was. Alvin turned to me and said, "You're going on wages. I'm the star of the show. Everybody tells me I should be paying you guys wages." So I said, "Well, I don't disagree with you. You're the star of the show. I've no argument with that whatsoever." But I said, "I'm not going on wages." And he said, "Well, yes, you are." And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Well, what do you mean you're not?" I said, "I'm not going on wages." I said, "I am always been a fair man." And I said, "I think what you're saying is not fair." Because I said, "We've taken the rough with the smooth with you. We've got to here, which we may never have done. And if you wanted to have put us on wages, you should have done it 8 years ago when we started out. And you didn't do that." So I said, "That's not going to be the deal for me, I'm afraid." I don't honestly know what Chicken Leo said to him. You'll have to ask Leo about that when you talk to him.
Yeah, and
But
that's why I asked you, Rick, because according to Leo, I quote, he said the breakup of the band, and I quote, each member had different aspirations and hopes, and the band members wanted a change, and that's why I ask you.
yeah, well, I think maybe he's been bit of a diplomat there, and I don't blame him. But I was over the years I've kind of avoided the question, danced around it, one thing or another, and I don't, and I see now. I mean, I hold no bad feelings for Alvin whatsoever, and I was thoroughly and utterly shocked when he died in 2013. Uh, and I just, sorry,
I'm sorry, they're telling me I got 1 minute left.
yeah, I
We,
heard
we,
it.
we
So,
can cover this on part 3, but give us your website, anything that you're working on that you want the audience to know about.
well, it's the obvious thing is my book. It's From Headstocks to Woodstock. You can get it at Amazon. If you want a dedication, the best way to do it is to go to rickleetya.com, and then that way you can get a personal dedication. And we have a practical way of doing that, so you don't have to pay ridiculous postage to get it shipped from England. There's another way we can do that.
Well, listen, I appreciate it again, and hopefully we could do part 3.
That'd be great, Brian. I'd be very happy to do that. Yeah.
Definitely an honor. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We'll
To you
speak
later.
soon.
Yeah. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was the legendary drummer of 10 Years After, Rick Lee, and we'll bring him back for a part 3, a long history in music. Until next week, happy collecting to all.